Good morning, America. Thank you for watching Taxes Made Easy. We've got interesting topics today, a lot of news out there, and really came across some very interesting thing about an income tax versus a consumption tax. So we're going to talk about the difference between the two and how that can really help Americans. So again, there's plenty of ways, reasons why politicians and Americans like the current income tax, but there's a plenty of issues with it as well. And so we're going to discuss some of the benefits. And these are active policies being proposed and discussed that actually have bearing on a presidential election. So again, tax policy and understanding, I think, is very important to determine long-term success and what's best for our country. So stay tuned, and we'll be right back after this short break. Welcome back, everybody. We've got a lot of news to cover, and we're going to just dive right into it. So first article here. It's an IRS article, and again, I think this is actually pretty helpful, which is why I wanted to talk about it. This is a free webinar on dealing with disasters from an individual tax perspective. So this is on September 26th, so coming up in just 3 days. But at the same time, you can usually go back and watch these webinars later on. So they're aimed at tax professionals, but anybody can sit there and watch and get some credit for it. So if you're a tax professional, but again, if you be aware, if you are in any of those disaster relief areas, talk to your tax professional, CPA. You want to claim it if you actually qualify for it. And we've gone over how to qualify for it. So still a quick article there right now. So one of the concerns here, and this is one of my big concerns, is literacy. So again, this is from the Daily College, so this is a right-leaning source, news source. But again, when I read things, when we look at people that are in prison, people that struggle in society, literacy is one of the biggest reasons why people struggle. And so again, it's no surprise that the Democrat Party is pushing climate, change literacy rather than focusing on actual reading and writing literacy. So actual literacy. And the average reading score for both 4th and 8th grade students have gone down by 3% relative to 2019. If you look at all the different ways to measure success, the number one is having a 2-parent home. Number 2 is literacy. If you look at the people that are in prison, the vast majority of them are not literate. And so I don't think it's just, I think public education has been failing students for years, your average student for years and years, and not helping and making sure that they're literate is a tragedy. It's a tragedy that's happening across the country. So we're spending hundreds of billions on education, pandemic aid for education, and yet the scores continue to go down. Less than 50% of all 4th grade students were able to read at or above standard proficiency. And when you go to minority students, the numbers are atrocious. 17% of Black students and 21% of Latino pupils. Now, this is just my opinion, but one of the best things, and this is something that I've seen, and when they have reading drives, sitting down and reading books with your children is one of the best ways to really help them gain literacy. Starting them to teach them to read before kindergarten, so that when they get to kindergarten, it's easy. They're already up and running. That's something, I've had 8 children altogether, 3 stepchildren, and each and every single one, I've worked really hard to make sure that they were reading or starting to read going into kindergarten. We read books to them on a regular basis, and they have thrived in school. And that's because you give them a strong sense of reading, and this just helps children throughout the entire process. Um, and again, it just goes through more data directly from the National Association of Educators, and about 2/3 of African American or American students can't read proficiently. About 40% of all students are effectively non-readers. It's just, it's scary. And it keeps going on, and the article blames Democrats, rightly or wrongly. But I think this is something everybody should be aware of, and how this can absolutely affect students and long-term success of Americans. And I think you could really focus on actual literacy and math instead of everything else. That's what these kids really need. That's what they really need for long-term success. So next article, again, this is I don't know if this is a bit much or what. I mean, this is a town hall article. So the police commissioner for New York, from Eric Adams' administration, and he's the mayor of New York, his administration is under heavy scrutiny by the feds. So the police commissioner resigned, and a week later, the next guy has his home raided. So Thomas Donlan took over, and a week later, they go to his actual home and did an FBI raid. So either he's part of this, hand in hand with the previous police commissioner, or maybe the FBI's been a little heavy-handed here. It's just, yeah. And so apparently they're looking into whether he took classified documents while he was with the FBI and Department of Homeland Security. And again, they're sending a clear signal to Mayor Eric Adams that no one is safe. So what is going on here? I mean, this is one of the biggest cities in the world. Very important city. I mean, there's not a whole lot here, but the idea that they're just going after New York like this is just kind of mind-boggling. Yeah, so it's pretty nuts. Next article I want to share is actually an interesting article. This actually just came out over the weekend. Well, yesterday. Angela Alsobrooks. So you might ask, who is Angela Alsobrooks? That's the first thing I asked. And this is a CNN article, but it's on all kinds of websites and news stories. And it's coming out. Well, first of all, who is she? She's the Democrat Senate candidate for Maryland, running against the former governor, popular governor Larry Hogan. So can a popular former governor who's a Republican actually win in Maryland? Who knows? But again, it's a close race, but this doesn't help. So apparently, Angela Alsobrooks, this could just be simple mistakes she had, or it could be an ongoing problem. So here's Angela Alsobrooks. So CNN did the review of property records, found this issue, claimed a homestead tax exemption for more than a decade that was only supposed to be applied to someone's primary residence, and it wasn't just on that home, on multiple other homes. She improperly claimed a senior citizen's tax break on her Washington property. She got that from her grandparents, who did qualify, but when she took over, that exemption was never dropped. So she was improperly claiming multiple deductions on multiple properties here. Um, and so they kind of go through and break this down. And again, right before an election, it's kind of mind-boggling that CNN would break this story right before a big important election, because this could make it much harder for the Democrats to control the Senate or continue to control the Senate. Um, so again, she's going to pay the issues have been highlighted. She said, look, she's not contesting it. She's going to pay the bills. So there's nothing criminal here. It doesn't rise to that level, and from the numbers that they're showing, it's not that high of a number. Um, if an average American did it, would they be treated differently? Probably not. They're getting audited. This is being exposed, and she's going and paying the bills. Did she fraudulently hide this? It doesn't appear so. So it doesn't rise to the level of criminality here. But is it something to consider? Possibly. And one thing they do point out is that, I'm not sure where in the article, but it does talk about there's plenty of other people that have run into similar exemptions on both sides of the aisle or issues. So again, another news story in an important race. And jumping to the next article. This is Elon Musk is back in the news. And I don't know if he's being targeted or, holy crap, Elon, get it right. Get this straight. It's one of the two. So, the SEC is grilling Elon Musk. Elon Musk is sick of the SEC. And now he's failed their period twice, so they're going to actually hit him with a penalty. And they're saying that his gamesmanship and delay tactics must cease. So, just hours before his testimony, his attorney informed the SEC that he would not be able to attend because he needed to be at the launch of the Polaris Dawn mission. I don't know if that carries water. I mean, when it's the Republicans trying to get people to show up to subpoenas, they get mad and frustrated, and so again, I think Musk should at least show up. And so they're investigating whether Musk or anyone else committed securities fraud in 2022. So another issue, whether or not this is legitimate, they're just investigating at this time, but they're going to hold him in civil contempt for only giving a few hours notice. Again, that's not professional. I can understand why the SEC is annoyed and wants to smack him with some kind of penalty. Again, they have multiple other ongoing investigations. Is this politically motivated? Maybe. I don't know. That's above my pay grade. But Elon Musk, not only in Brazil, but here in the United States, has quite a few ongoing issues. We'll see what happens here. So we're up against another break, and we will be right back. Welcome back, everybody. So we're going to move more clearly onto the IRS, and this is an interesting article from Newsmax. And again, this is more of a right-leaning source. But again, this is an opinion article, and the IRS spends more of our money only to waste and lose it. Well, yeah, pretty much. It's really kind of funny how the IRS needs to modernize. And some of the things the IRS they're doing, I think, is great. So especially modernizing their online system, making it easier for people to go directly to the IRS, get transcript information, and they made it a lot easier for tax professionals to get power of attorneys filed. The problem is they lose it half of the time. I mean, the IRS has become less efficient in many ways. And yes, they're having to hire a whole bunch of people and train them. And they've had a huge brain drain. So there's a lot of problems going on with the IRS. But most of their efforts are going after audits and people. So, do we really want to look at the details here? Like making laws and sausages, maybe you'd rather not know how the IRS cost benefit calculations work. It's the numbers, overall numbers are just silly. So again, this is an opinion piece. Back in 2022, the drunken sailors in Congress in charge of earning money gave the IRS $80 billion to hire new agents in the audit division, mostly in audits and going after people. Their job: crack down on millionaires, billionaires, and large corporations that were allegedly cheating on their taxes. So they recently, in the last couple months, they've proclaimed with much fanfare, look, we caught 1.3 billion. How much did they spend? 80 billion. To claw back 1.3 billion and increase the audits and scrutiny of business owners across the board. Now, they're not just going after business owners. They're also going across the board at people that they think aren't paying their taxes. I've shared publications from the IRS, well, the TICTA unit in particular, calling the IRS out that they have no mechanism in place, very little, they have almost nothing in place right now to actually make sure they're only going after the wealthy, as promised time and time again by President Biden, now Vice President Harris. They're going after everybody. They really are. So they didn't have the resources to pursue these wealthy non-filers. Now it does. But Janet Yellen, I don't trust her as far as I can throw her. So they're going after 80% of businesses. They're auditing. They're being very, very aggressive. And they're saying, hey, let's go with a larger number. She said 1.1 billion, but even at 1.3 billion, that means the IRS spent $62 for every $1 in delinquent taxes it collected. So again, this is government math here. That they spent $62 to collect $1 on average. And again, taxes should be paid by everyone. We need to make sense, but overspending like crazy just to go after and audit and scrutinize people like crazy is counterproductive. We're hurting businesses, we're hurting individuals. There are plenty of legitimate businesses that instead of saying, hey, here's an issue, let's address this, they're cracking down and being extremely aggressive here. And for what point? We have our overall federal revenues are higher than ever, but we still are broke because we're spending more than ever. So that's the thing. It's not a revenue problem. It's a spending problem. And that's the thing. The more that going after people for 1.3 billion, spending 80 billion to go after 1.3 is classic government math. That just doesn't make any sense. It's just, but again, they don't talk about that. So they point out that who actually owes more than business owners? Apparently, they got 1.3 million from increasing audits, but if they looked at IRS employees, they owe about 1.5 billion, an estimated number. So they found 70 current employees who have intentionally cheated the system. Only 20 lost their jobs, and they usually get rehired anyway. So it's just points out some of the irony here. Again, we love to throw money at problems. It is usually very counterproductive. So moving to next article, this goes back to the budget. So Chuck Schumer calls out Republicans for wasting time as a tentative funding deal is announced. Did they? very possibly, Chuck Schumer could be very accurate about this because they came up with this continuing resolution, wouldn't cut a thing, and they were going to attach a save plan to make elections more, to make sure that we only had citizens voting, which is the law. Go figure. And they folded right away. So Speaker Johnson folded right away. He's like, we went over the past 4 days, we've had bipartisan, bicameral negotiations, and they're going to just continue spending. So for the next 6 months, it's just going to be a continued resolution to just continue spending. And Speaker Johnson will have to pass it with Democrat support, as he did the last one, which again infuriates some of the Republicans, actually fighting for some cuts in spending. But again, here's the three most powerful people in Congress right now. Jeffries, who's the Senate House Minority Leader, is not in the picture, but Mike Johnson, Chuck Schumer, and Mitch McConnell all spending our money, and no one's really serious about cuts. And the crazy thing is, he's probably right. Speaker Johnson is right that right now, right before an election, is probably the worst time to have a protracted budget fight and a government shutdown. But what about all the other times? What about all the other opportunities to actually say we have to stop spending like drunken sailors? Mainstream GOP in Congress is not serious about it. If they were serious about it and actually dug in their heels, they would have, sometime this year, they would have done something. Sometime over the last 2 years that they've had the majority, they would have done something and actually stood up and fought. So I fault the Republicans almost as much as the Democrats here. There's a very small minority of Republicans that won't vote for continued resolutions that continue spending at their historically high levels. So next article is an opinion from townhall.com. So this comes from Congressman Andy Biggs, who is raising these curtains and saying, hey, Schumer wasn't serious about this, or Mike Johnson wasn't serious about this from the beginning. He just slapped the SAVE Act on there to try to get Republicans to vote for it. We have a lot to cover, so I'm just going to kind of skim through this. He could have been really arguing for this during the 7-week recess. Instead, this happened at the last moment. And it's just a continuation of spending and just kicking the can down the road again, which is what Congress does. And they do it to the detriment of the American public. So I would love to see someone get serious about our spending problem. We cannot continue to spend $2 trillion more and just add so much more to our budget, or our budget deficit, or our national debt, and to how much we have to pay in interest on the debt every single year. It's a huge problem that we're creating for our future. And again, unless we do something serious about it, it's going to be an ongoing problem for decades to come. That will greatly weaken our country. So switching gears, I'm going to talk about tariffs, and the topic for the day is tariffs versus or a consumption tax versus income tax. So it's interesting that this is happening now. This is something the Biden administration has been talking about, as well as the Trump campaign. So back when President Biden was still campaigning and still running for re-election, Trump came out and said, I'm going to do an 80% tariff on Chinese goods. And President Biden came out and said, I'll do 100%. Maybe trying to outdo Trump. I don't know. But going after Beijing's harmful policies and practices, that their communist government is doing everything to undercut the IRS or the United States. And it's it's very, very destructive to our economy, and they're doing this on purpose. Um, so again, we're sharp tariff hikes on imports from China, including 100% duty on EVs. Currently, it's at 25%, and so it's going to jump from 25% tariff to 100%. And this is where some of the articles come out that they're talking about slapping tariffs on Mexican cars being made and produced in Mexico that are being done by Chinese companies. So they're going through Mexico to try to do an end round against these tariffs because they're going to really hit these EVs hard. But it will. I mean, China's doing this to Europe too, where it's undercutting domestic production, and again, it's very damaging to the local economies. Also, 100% tariff on needles and syringes, 50% tariffs on semiconductors, solar cells, face masks, and surgical gloves, and then 25% tariffs on EV batteries and other batteries, battery parts, critical minerals, steel, and aluminum products. Why? So, to go after the harmful policies and practice, but also to stand up for American industry in the face of unfair trade practices. And this is to ensure that the U.S. EV industry diversifies away from China's dominant supply chain. So China has been doing everything they can to monopolize rare metals, to monopolize EV solar production, and I think it's a good move. Why now instead of 4 years ago? Who knows? But I think it's a step in the right direction. It's something both political parties are talking about. And so again, here they continue to go on about how this has really been a huge unfair advantage from Chinese EVs that are heavily subsidized. They're designed to be as cheap as possible and just to undercut domestic production. So, so this is interesting. The Biden administration first announced the tariff hikes in May after the USTR following a 4-year review of the Trump-era tariffs. So Trump came in, slapped China with tariffs, and they recommended that President Biden keep all of the tariffs and add more. So I think it's a little ironic that when he proposed these tariffs, a lot of people said, "Oh, the world is falling." A lot of liberal economists, and now they're doubling down on them. Why? China's gotten worse, not better. And that. So they announced an exemption for ship-to-shore crane imports. While they already have 2 years to fulfill these orders, they don't want to make that worse. Expect China to respond in kind, but since they're already doing everything they can to make sure that American products aren't even made in China, but they're undercutting American production in China, it probably won't have nearly as big of an effect. But tariffs are not a simple answer across the board, but I do think it's very interesting that the Biden administration is doing this and doing this wholeheartedly. So jumping to the next article, probably not going to share that. This is from the New York Times, and I actually thought it was a pretty good article. So talking about Trump, and this really is the topic for the day, and the idea of tariffs versus income. Tariffs have a very bad reputation. Long term, they can be seen as just raising costs for consumers. But what if you counterbalance that? So tariffs are a form of consumption tax, and that's really what we're going to get into today. So again, we have slogans, social media posts, etc. He's dribbled out ideas that when taken collectively could really change how taxes are collected in the U.S. So again, we haven't had a comprehensive plan rolled out from Trump. But again, this is direction he's going, and I think the New York Times here pretty much hits a nail on the head. Good for them. So he's hinted at a vastly different tax system last summer. And rather than taxing Americans on the money they earn at their jobs, he suggested imposing broad tax on goods that Americans buy from abroad. So tariffs. So again, this is going to make things more expensive, foreign goods more expensive in the United States. And when other countries, it's not a question if, they're most likely clearly going to do the same thing, which will hurt American exports abroad. So that's why generally tariffs have a very bad reputation. Whether or not this is a good idea is yet to be seen, but there are pros and cons to it. So again, this idea seemed to fizzle, go nowhere. It got a lot of negative comments in the news and from the media. But when you take these together, they could have a huge effect. So again, there are three ways to tax, and I'm going to jump ahead actually for a quick little video here. I thought it was pretty interesting here, just a basic explanation.
Taxes are necessary to finance needed government spending, but taxes can be made a lot simpler and more efficient. A uniform consumption tax is the best way for the government to raise revenue with the least damage to the economy. This tax would replace personal, corporate, and estate taxes. It could operate as a national sales tax or a value-added tax. Under a consumption tax, people only pay taxes when they spend money, rather than on their income or assets. People who spend more, pay more. Earnings that are saved, invested, used to expand businesses, produce products, or employ people are left alone. A consumption tax would massively simplify the tax code. The corrosive perception that wealthy people use prominent lawyers to game the system would end. Rather than complex tax maneuvers and garnering subsidies, businesses could focus on making better products. The most common complaint about a consumption tax is that it falls equally on everybody and thus does not transfer enough resources from better off to worse off. But a consumption tax can easily be progressive. There could be an exemption up to a specified dollar amount of consumption, or equivalently, the government could send everyone a check for that amount. And if a flat consumption tax funds transfers and social programs, then the whole system can be as progressive as voters like. A consumption tax would simplify the tax code, promote economic efficiency, and increase political transparency.
So we're going to come up on a break in about 10 seconds. And this article is very pro-consumption tax, and we're going to break it down on tariffs. It gets a little tricky. So we'll be right back after this break. Welcome back, everybody. And we're going to jump back to this New York Times article. So we have an idea of what a consumption tax is. And the idea is that instead of taxing work, and an idea behind taxes, anytime you want to decrease something, you want to get less of something, tax it. So we do this with cigarettes. We do this with alcohol, all kinds of things. That we want to reduce the amount of, if we want to reduce something or repress something, just tax it. So if we're taxing income, we're going to get less work on that income. And that's just typically how things go. So instead of taxing money that they earn at their jobs and on their investments, if you flip it on its head, it's a broad tax on goods that Americans buy from abroad. And the idea between a consumption tax, a flat consumption tax, really is either a national sales tax or a VAT tax. Now, tariffs target foreign goods first and foremost because domestic goods don't have that. But there's pros and cons to that as well. So one of the things that they're saying is by saying no taxes on tips and no taxes on overtime, no taxes on Social Security income, you're opening up big holes in the income tax base. And again, it's really so again they mentioned Social Security benefits, making those non-taxable as well as keeping his tax cuts from the TCJA. So the joke is that maybe over the next 2 weeks he'll get all the way and fully eliminate the income tax with all of his proposals. So is he going to go that far? Probably not immediately. Is he heading in that direction? Yes. And that's where most advanced economies already are. Canada, Germany, Japan, they all have a VAT tax. Now, a VAT, valued added tax, is where they tax at every step of the production. I don't think that's a great idea. And it becomes a national sales tax on goods and services. If we get rid of the income tax and replace them with the national sales tax, that it might be a hard sell, but I think, ironically so, there are many, many benefits to that. So, and one of their big concerns here is it could explode the deficits, spur trade fights, and disproportionately burden lower income Americans. There are ways, like the video mentioned, there are ways to do that. You can offset it with more social spending. You can, for the poorest, you can just cut everybody a check on, for so much to offset what they actually pay, so it balances out. There are ways to address that, but it would simplify the tax code. And really is a shift from taxing income to taxing consumption. Now, it goes into this a little bit more, but that's really where I want to take this and just kind of take a step back. And last article that we're going to share here really is consumption tax definition types versus income tax. And so it's a tax on the purchase of a good or service, more system taxing people on how much they consume rather than how much they earn. There are some huge benefits to doing it this way. And we've had some severe distortions in our economy due to having income tax for punishing savers. And again, when people are saving, it really does hurt them in the long run. When we have government overspending, inflation, people would be paying a lot more attention to how their savings get eroded by, poor fiscal management by the government. So we focus so much on retail spending and we want people to buy, take their income and then just go spend it on credit cards or whatever to keep the economy going. And we provide all kinds of incentives to keep this vicious wheel going, but we don't incentivize savings. So as a country, we're really bad at incentivizing savings. When you talk about helping the poor, even if they can't save a lot, from when they're young, if they can save a little bit and build on that, that's how you move people from tax bracket to the next. That's how you help people find prosperity, and you help them by incentivizing good habits. That's what helps long run. So I'm sorry about this. Okay, here you have breaking down a consumption tax. How do they work? It's just like sales tax, and it's a lot easier for the government because you have businesses just paying taxes, and it's much easier to track, and it's much easier, it's so much easier than the current income tax system. Do I applaud this? Yes, I think it would be great for our economy. and we used consumption tax for most of our history before we replaced it with an income tax back in the early 1900s. The Bush administration tried to go more to a consumption tax, and so the idea was to use both, start using a consumption tax with some kind of progressive income tax system. We'll probably get some kind of combination. Japan, it goes through the example of Japan and what they went through. But the types of consumption taxes, you have a value added tax, which is what most European countries and Canada have. Again, it can get really expensive because at every level of production, there's a tax. I don't think that's a great idea. I think we should just charge one tax so it's easy to see what the government's taking from us at the consumer level. So a VAT tax is taxing at every step of the production rather than just when it's actually sold to the final consumer. And again, it hides the true cost. I don't like that any kind of tax where it's hard to understand how much that you're actually paying to the government. Government loves to do that because they get more taxes that way, but by hiding the ball, it's very. It makes it harder for voters to understand and consumers to understand, actual policy and be better informed. Excise taxes are taxes that go to a specific class of goods. Alcohol, tobacco, gas is a huge one, or tourism. Some of them are to discourage a behavior or the purchase of goods thought to be detrimental to the economy. So right now, gas taxes are through the roof across the country. And then import duties, this is really where we get into tariffs. And those costs you pass on to final consumers. So slapping a 100% tariff on Chinese EVs are going to make Chinese electric vehicles much more expensive. The idea is to discourage the people from purchasing those and purchasing European or American products that are much better. So again, it's targeted to China. And three of the largest producers are Japanese. Toyota, Honda, and I believe Hyundai, I think, is South Korean. Retail sales tax, pretty straightforward, pretty easy to see. Almost all the states have sales taxes, but there's no federal sales tax. So what are the pros and cons here? It talks about the countries that have a consumption tax. Consumption taxes are taxes on the purchase of goods and services. And it doesn't really dive into it. I'm going to stop sharing here. When we talk about economic freedom and becoming financially independent, you really can't do that without saving, without investing, without flipping the script on how taxes and money is earned. So again, this is how the wealthy get rich and stay rich. If you're not saving, you're not investing for your future, then you're not gonna thrive long term. If you're not paying down debt, and a lot of people say, look, it's hard. It absolutely is hard. And especially with our current taxation system, it's not rewarded. So again, doing a consumption tax where people, again, it's harder for the poorer people to do that because they're already spending most of their income. But if you get rid of their income taxes and then allow them to take money tax-free, save it, invest it, and know that by saving, investing, they're building your wealth over time. And then if you take some out and you're going to buy something, it might be more expensive, but you were able to save and invest. And as a country, we are a spend country. There are so many economic advantages to being a saving country versus a consumer-driven country where it's spend, spend, spend. So the incentives to save and invest versus going and spending make all the sense in the world. People might upset, a lot of people, and a lot of these same people, the same people that claimed inflation was transitory, that government overspending would not cause problems. I just want to take those people and, yeah. Either they're not that intelligent or they're just lying, because history has proven time and time again that Keynesian economics is a failure. And that's a very bold statement out there. But you cannot just spend, spend, spend without consequences, real world consequences. And we encourage Americans to spend, 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 not to save. And it doesn't help. When we talk about literacy, I talked about literacy and how important reading and writing literacy is. We are as a country, we are financially illiterate. And by encouraging good financial behavior, our government flipping things on its head, reversing course, right now we don't encourage good financial literacy. We encourage people to spend money. And they get, the money that they get, you're going to pay taxes if you invest. We're going to go after you if you become wealthy. We should be rewarding people that make sound financial decisions moving forward. Easier to bank, easier to invest, and grow their finances. Attacking large corporations, you're attacking every single person that invests and saves money out there. Because if you just put your money in a bank account, right now you're losing money due to inflation. You have to invest it. And so that's why the whole tax the rich scheme, again, attacking one part of the ship, we're in the same boat together. Attacking some of the people on the boat does not help everybody else. All it does is drag the whole boat down. But if we encourage savings and investments, that's the kind of financial literacy that we need to be encouraging. We need to be teaching. And so again, if your own children, you as parents, more and more, you have to teach your children these concepts. If you don't know, go out and learn. And you know what? There are plenty of amazing organizations. I'm going to give a plug for a charity that we love and support here at Guardian Tax Law, and that's called Junior Achievement. Their whole goal is to teach financial literacy K through 12. It's a nonprofit. You can go online. They have all kinds of fun lessons. They have things that kids can get involved in. And like I said, it's K through 12, all the way through 12th grade. So they have lesson plans and ideas tailored to each grade level to help children learn. I've got a 13-year-old right now. I took him out refereeing. He made $100 on a Saturday. Not bad for a kid. And we're gonna go open a bank account at a credit union. Teach him that lesson. The credit unions are better than banks in many respects. Now, I'm sure there's bankers going to hear this and go, what? Well, for long-term investing, have your money in a credit union, go local, and then as you invest, and if you grow a business, then you might need to use a bank. I use a bank for my business, but again, it's learning and applying good financial habits is how people grow and find financial freedom in the long run. And so as a country, adopting and I don't know if that's where Trump's going. This is the New York Times. I don't want to give Trump more credit than he's due. But that's why I was really intrigued by that article. It called out the good and the bad, but at the same time, in general, moving towards a consumption-based taxation system would be great. It would kill my business. I negotiate with the IRS and defend people all day long. I could do that for sales tax instead of represent businesses with sales taxes, but I think it would be amazing for the country, amazing for the economy, and help people find that financial freedom. And I think it would be great for the country. I don't think Congress will ever do it because they have way too much power with their fingers, pulling triggers and subsidies, etc. But I hope this was an informative day, and I hope you take a lot from this. If you're not learning financial freedom, and teaching that to your children, it's almost as important as teaching them to read and write. And so I highly encourage you to do that. So, and there are plenty of sources, fun videos to watch online. So have a great day, and we will see you back with more educational information tomorrow.